Okay. So till this we completed uninstallation of all the things and we seen all the customization part also. So let me check. Okay, so PG administration. So we discussed in the Windows installation that day. So how to connect the database via PG admin, how to do the administration task in PG administration. So we done customization installation for all the methods. So just we are pending with the post installation steps. We'll see. Okay, so after build the database server, what are the things we have to take care? So suppose, okay, one of the application team, they asked to, so we newly build the database server, DB server. After build the database server, so we have to share the DB details to application team because end of the day, application team, they have to connect to database. They can utilize the database. So to configure, to connect the database, we have to share the DB details. So after build the database server, what are the things we have to do? Some post steps. We have to do some post steps. After performing post steps, we have to share the details to application team. This is the DB name. This is the port number. This is the host name where my database is running. This is the username. This is the password. Like this, these details we have to share to application team. So using those details, application team, they can configure their end. They may using PG admin or DBVR. There are GA tools. Two types of client tools are there. What are those? PG admin or DBVR. So there is a DBVR. DBVR. Let me can say this is the DBVR. Like this. So we can use like this. It will be looks like only PG admin only. So they may use DBVR or PG admin tool. So DBVR. Okay, these are the client tools in case of they want to connect the database in GUI mode. So either PG admin tool or DBVR, the functionality is same, way of connecting is same for both the tools. So we have to share the details, the database details. Using those details, they can connect via PG admin or DBVR. So what are the post steps we have to perform? We know how to build the database server for each and every method, either source code method or M method or RPM method or Windows method. So once build the database server, we know we are going to connect the locally. You can see. So there are two types of connections are there. There are two types of connections are there. Local connection. Second is remote connection. So what is the meaning of local connection? So you can see if you are directly log into DB server, if you directly log into DB server, then connect to database. That is the local connection. That is the local connection. If you directly come to instead, if you attend the offline classes, that is the direct. You are attending the classes physically. Now you are attending the classes logically, not directly via Zoom application. You currently you attend the classes. So the same way there is a local connection means if you directly log into database server where the database server is located in general, the database server is located in the client place. If you directly go to the client place, if you log into directly DB server, then try to establish the connection to database. So that is the local connection. So what is the meaning of remote connection? The database server is located in the some other place. Suppose you are in the Hyderabad. You are working. Your work location is Hyderabad. So the client database server is located in the Mumbai. Suppose if you take SBI project. So all the banking headquarters is Mumbai. So database server is located in the Mumbai, but my work location is Hyderabad. So how to connect the database server? Using a remote connection. Using remote connection. Because my database server is not in my place. I am in different location. Database server is a different location. There are, let me open Paint. You can see here. This is my database server. This is my database server. So here my database is up and running. DB server. So what is the database? HRMS. Here my database server is up and running. So this is located in, suppose, Mumbai. Mumbai. So I am in Hyderabad. I am in Hyderabad. So I want to connect. This is my laptop. Inside the laptop, I install PC admin tool. I install PC admin tool. This is my PC admin tool installed. Using this PC admin tool, I want to establish the connection. So my database is not in my place. So I am in the Hyderabad. I am in the Hyderabad. Because my work location is Hyderabad, but my database server, my client place is Mumbai. All the servers are located in the client place only, that is Mumbai. So if you log into directly this database server, if you go to Mumbai and directly log into this database server, that is the local connection. Try to understand. Who are new to this IT industry, so they have to understand what is the local connection, what is the remote connection. Already experienced people, they know. So because all are there in this batch, so few people are there new to this IT platform. So few people are there, already experienced people. Okay, so that's why we are going to depth. So what is the local connection? If you directly log into database server, that is the local connection. If your database server is Mumbai location, if you are in Hyderabad, if you try to establish the connection from Hyderabad to database server where my database server is located in Mumbai. So this is the remote connection. This connection we called as a remote connection. Remote connection. Clear? Understand? What is the remote connection? Remote connection. Yeah. So I can access the database remotely because database is not in my local system. Just in my local system, I have only PC admin. I installed only PC admin. Where my database is running? My database is running in this server. So this server we can say database server. So where you try to establish the connection, that mission we called as a client mission. Client mission. This is our client mission. Client mission or client server. So where you trying to establish the connection, that mission we called as a client mission or client server. So where your database is running, that server we call as a database server. Database server. This is the database server. In real time, up to suppose we consider this is the application team. This is the application server where the application developers, they want to establish the connection remotely where my database is running on other than application server. So here, this is the database server. So that is about local connection and remote connection. When you build the database server, directly by default, it will allow the local connection only. Just I build the database server newly. So when you build the database server, directly it will allow new connections, that is local connections it will allow. But it cannot allow remote connections. By default, it will allow only local connections only. That is the default behavior. If you want to allow remote connections as well, you have to enable few parameters. What are the parameters we have to enable? That is the post steps only. So can say, so there is a parameter file. where it was located parameter file. What was the parameter file? There is a postgresql.config file. In PostgreSQL database, every cluster, every instance, it has one parameter file. That parameter file name is postgresql.config file. It was located inside a data directory. If we go to data directory, we can see this file. Inside this file, inside this file, inside this file, there is a two parameters are there. There is a two parameters are there. Let me before after. So there is a listener underscore address parameter. Listener underscore address parameter. So by default, this parameter value localhost. That's why by default we can able to connect by locally. If you log into directly database server, it treat as a local connection. It will allow the local connection to establish the database. So what was the port number for this each and every cluster? By default, cluster is created with the default port number 5432. You have to enable these two parameters. You have to enable these two parameters. So after enable means we have to remove this hash and keep this star. You can see here star. Star means we are telling to system we are enabling the connections for any IP address, not only specific IP address. Suppose our application server trying to establish the connection from application server IP address. This is the, you can see here, this is we treat as a, this is the client mission. What is the IP address here? If config. I want to establish the connection. I want to try to establish the connection from this server. This is the client and mission. So if you give like this, that means the database, it will allow what are the connections coming from this application server only. If we keep star, that means from which whatever the application server, whatever the connections coming from any application IP address, it will allow to establish the connection. That is listener underscore address. It is listening the connections. What are the connections coming from this IP address only? If you don't want to, if you want to allow for all the connections coming from whatever the IP address, whatever the application server, you can keep star. Means it consider, it will allow, it will listen the all the connections coming from any IP address, any application server. And port also we have to enable. By default, it's comment out hash, remove the hash, enable the parameter means remove the hash, then keep the value. How you want to enable the connections. If you want to enable the connections for a specific application server, you can keep that application IP address, or if you want to allow all connections, what are the connections coming from any application server, you can keep star. Based on your requirement, you can keep this. Clear? Understand these two? But these are the post steps we have to, after build the database server, you have to enable these two parameters. Once enable these two parameters, as of now, you can blindly restart the cluster to reflect these changes. After enable these parameters, you have to restart the cluster. How to restart the cluster? We know. How to restart? pg underscore ctl restart, or you can stop and start. Anything is fine. Once restart the cluster, these will be reflected. Then after restarting the cluster onwards, this cluster able to listen all the connections, all the incoming connections. The connection is coming from any application server. First, it has to listen. If it is listen, means after listening, if the user having the right privileges, it will allow to establish the connection. So if it is listening only local connections, by default listening only local connections. That's why it will not allow any remote connections by default. So shall we go and do the post steps? Let me see. This is the applications. This is the database server. I treating as this is the database server. On the database server, just newly we build the database server. My database is running. Let me go and check that parameters whether it is enabled or disabled. PS minus grep Postgres. My database is running. Let me go to data directory. You can say here we can say the parameter file postgresql.config file. This is the parameter file where it was located inside a data directory. This is the default data directory where pgsql 14 data. So you can say vi postgresql.config file. You can vi this file. You can search with the string port. You can say what is the port 543 disabled. Again there is another parameter listen underscore address. What was the default value? Local host. Can see here what IP address to listen on. You can keep IP address. Which IP address? IP address means application server. Suppose I can say this is one application server. So later there is another application server. They want to use same database. This is another application server. App server 2. There is another application server. Yes. Application server 3. So like this, if you want to listen only specific IP address connections only, then you can keep only this IP address. Suppose this IP address 192.168.0.11. Yes, this IP address 192.168.0.112. This IP address 192.168.0.113. If you want to allow only specific application server connections only, whatever the connections coming from this server only, I want to allow these connections only. In that case, you can keep listen underscore address equal to you can keep this IP address only 0.111. Where this enable this parameter inside the database server, there is a parameter file. Inside that parameter file, we have to enable this parameter. Suppose I want to allow all the IP address connections. What are the connections coming from? This IP address and this IP address. You can say I want to allow these connections also. So in that case, you can keep star so that it will listening all the connections coming from whatever the application server, whatever the IP address, whether it is 111, 112, 113, whatever. If you want to allow specific two IP address only, then you can comma separator 0.111 comma 192.168.0.112, so that it will listen only those two IP address connections only. That is the main parameter. After build the database server, you have to enable these two parameters. Then only anyone can establish the connection to the database. If these two parameters is comment out disabled, it cannot allow any remote connections. Local connections it will allow by default. Okay, so let me just enable the parameter and keep star. Let me remove localhost. Then this is the port number we used for this instance. So enable these two parameters. You can say after save this file. Now you can restart. How to restart? You can either pgctl or systemctl, that anything is fine. Now you can say what is the data directory here? We used this is the data directory. The path also different. Let me use this is our, if you want to manual, yes. bin pgctl -d data directory restart. Instead of stop and start, I am going to directly restart. You can say server stop and started. Now you can verify cat grep port. Yes, port is enabled. And listen underscore address. You can say listen underscore address. It's the value will be reflected after restarting. Now we are good. Our cluster able to listen any type of connections. What are the incoming connections? Able to listen. Clear? These are the post steps we have to perform. Once done post steps, we have to what details we have to share to application team. So general, what are the details? Suppose we establish the connection via we connect the database via PG admin. If you want to connect the PG database via PG admin, what details we required? DB name, username, password, and port number, and DB host name. So these are the details mandatory to establish the connection remotely. As a DBA, I want to connect the database via PG admin. As an application developer, they want to connect the database either PG admin or DBA. For any client tool they may use, these are the details mandatory they required. So what is the DB name? Suppose HRMS, application database. What is the username? Suppose some application user are, you have to create the user. Each and every application developer we have to create the user. Suppose username ABC, we have to create the database, and password ABC, and the port. What was the port number? We know we installed 5432. What is the DB host name? This is the DB host name. You can say host name. So like this, these are all the details we have to share to application team. Using these details, they have to open PC admin their side, open new connection. So configure the connection with details. They can able to connect the database. So this is how, these are the details we have to share to application team after performing post steps. You can say post steps after build the database server. Clear? Need to share below details to application team to connect to the database. Database host name, port number, DB name, username, port password. Any queries in this post steps? If no questions, okay, we'll go and see the.
So in Venkat, in one Linux machine,
Mm-hmm.
we have two or three PostgreSQLs.
Mm-hmm.
In such case,
Mm-hmm.
can we give the star option, or do we need to define in the other option?
Sorry,
So how
sorry.
we can in configuration files? So can we give the star for all the Postgres clusters, or do we need to segregate
For
like
each
something
and
different
every
name?
cluster, we have separate parameter file. It's not each and
No,
every
no.
cluster, each and every instance, there is a separate parameter file.
Yeah, I understand. Okay, for each and every cluster have the separate configuration file.
Mm-hmm.
The each and every separate configuration file,
Mm-hmm.
the listener address can we give star? In such case, how application will be connect?
We'll see later. Okay. As of now, those are the post steps. Okay. So that will comes in the next topic. Wait and see. Okay.
Okay, yeah.
Don't worry. Huh? It will cover. As of now, what are the cluster, the port number, the listener will be applicable instance level only, not specific to database. User has to specify the database, which database you want to connect. Suppose if you specify HRMS, if the HRMS database inside the cluster, my cluster is running with the port number 5432. Inside the cluster, HRMS database is there, it's going to connect. If not there, it throws error. Based on the port number, we can specify the cluster current cluster port number 5432. So we are going to hitting to this cluster. You are going to establish the connection to this cluster where the cluster is running with the default port number 5432. So what database you want to connect? You have to specify the database PSQL. Last time we have seen, right? PSQL. So PSQL option. If it is command line mode, PSQL -d -username -p port number like this. If it is PC admin, you have to mention the details while configure the PC admin. What database you want to configure? This database is running on which cluster? The cluster port number you have to specify. What username you want to establish the connection? It is the default user. Yes. If it is own user, the own user should be there in the inside the cluster. The database host name, this database where is running, what are the cluster specified cluster port number, this cluster is running on which host, the host name, everything details we have to specify. Suppose, okay, DB name host Postgres. Inside the cluster, we may have a number of databases. Yes, if you don't want to connect to Postgres, if you want to connect HRMS, specify the, for all the database, port number is common. Port number is specific to cluster level only, not DB. Whatever the database inside the cluster, for all the database, the port number and host name is, these two are the same. Clear? I hope you got.
Oh, yeah, I got it, Venkat. Thank you.
Yeah, yes. Okay, so these are the post steps. Okay, so we done. So now our database is ready. Our database is ready, accept to any type of connections. Before that, it's accept only local connections only, because our listener parameter, this is the listener parameter in Postgres. Listener parameter is which is listening all the incoming connections. So when this listener able to listen, if we keep star means it listening all type of connections. If by default local host, that means our listener listening only local connections only. So we made our listener listening all type of connections by keeping star. Now our cluster is ready to accept any type of connections. So now we can share these details to application team. They're trying to establish the connection. If they are face any issues, they come back. We have to check. So how they are establish the connection? Here we are taking the two missions. Let me, okay. Can say this is the client mission. This is the client mission, the black one. This is the red color is the database server. Or let me the same color. Can say this is the, sorry. This is the client mission. Our client mission is, can see in this also, this is the client mission. We treat as a, this is the application server. This we treat as a database server. The paint diagram also. So this is the application server. This is the database server. Where my database is running on my database server. Suppose my database HRMS or Postgres, whatever. So in this database server, currently only one cluster is running. If you want to create another cluster, yes, you can create. We'll see. Next topic is multi-cluster. How to configure the multiple clusters. As of now, only one cluster is running. We assuming only one cluster is running. The cluster port number is default 5432. What is the cluster port number? 5432. And we enable the parameter just now. Listen underscore address equal to keeping star. Star. Yes. Our cluster able to listen all type of connections, because we enable the these two parameters, port equal to 5432, listen underscore address equal to star. So our cluster, our database server side, what are the things we have to do database server side? So make sure our database is should up and running. Make sure DB cluster is up. Yes, we already verified cluster is up, and we have to enable listener and port parameter. We already done listener and port parameter. Can say this is the first step. Make sure our database cluster should be up and running. Second step, we have to enable port and listener port. Listener parameter and port. We have to enable. We have to enable enable listener and port parameter. Yes, we already done. Why we are enabling these two parameters? Our cluster able to listen on all type of connections, because application team they want to establish the connection. So this connection system is treated as a remote connection. It's not a local connection. For accepting remote connections, we have to enable the listener parameter. We already done. That is the second step. In the database server side, so in the client side to establish the connection, what we require here? This is the client place. This is the client mission. So from here, I want to establish the connection where my database is running in this server. How to establish the connection from client place? What we required here to establish the connection? What we required here? Application server. What are the client tools to establish the connection to database, Postgres database? What are the client tools? Tell me. Yes. What are the client tools?
PG admin and DBA.
Yes. So they have to use PG admin or DBA, or if it is command line mode, they have to use PSQL. So when you can use PSQL, if it is command line mode, if they want to connect the database command line mode, they have to use PSQL utility. How to get the PSQL utility? How to get the PSQL utility? This is the application server. It's not a database server. How to get the PSQL utility? Yes. So this is a not database server. Suppose, okay, in this just I install a Linux server. I am going to use this as a client mission. Now I want to establish the connection from this mission to this mission where my database is running here. You can say ps minus script Postgres. My database is running here. So what is our database? Suppose /l Postgres is my database is running on this server. I want to connect to this database from this client mission. So that is the remote connection. So from here, I want to establish the connection via command line mode. How to do that? What we required client tools. If it is command line mode, we need PSQL. So to get PSQL, what we required here? In this, I want to PSQL. What we do in this? What we have to install to get PSQL?
We have to install I forgot
Yeah, Postgres binaries we have to install.
yes, binaries, yeah.
So we have to install binaries. If we install only Postgres software, client software, we'll get the PSQL. So what is the where it was located PSQL? Inside the home location, inside the bin folder. How to get home location, bin folder, these all the things. When you install only client software, you get the all the Postgres binaries. How to install the Postgres binaries? We know. If it is source code method, download the software, enter, configure, make install. If it is a RPM method, there is a two RPM files. By using these two RPM files, client libraries, client software, by using these two, we can install. You can use any method. You have to install only client software only. If you install client software, we can get the PSQL. If you have PSQL, I can establish the connection remotely. Here my database is not running. Here my database is not running locally. I want to establish the connection where my database is running other than this server. This is the client mission. Suppose we are assuming I am an application developer. I want to connect my database. So I got the details. DBA shared the details. This is the DB name, host name, username, password, port number. I want to establish the connection. If it is a Windows mission, client mission is Windows, we can use PG admin. Suppose client mission is client there in the Linux mission. So how to establish the connection in Linux mission? We have to use PSQL. To get the PSQL, we have to install only client software only. So the client side, we have to install Postgres client software only. No need to build the database server here, client place. Just to invoke the connection, to make a connection, we need PSQL. That is the client binary file PSQL. How to get the client binaries? We have to install only Postgres binaries only. No need to build the database server. But database server side, we need to build the database server. Here we need to build the database server. Then we have to enable these two parameters. Then our database is ready to accept connections. So like this, we have to client side, we have to install binaries. In the database server side, we have to cluster is up. We have to build the database server. We have to enable these two parameters. Next, third step. So there is a pghsba.config file. There is a pghsba.config file. Let me go to data directory. Yes, here I am here. So cat pghsba. There is a file. Very important file. PG host based authentication file. What is that? HBA means host based authentication file. HBA means host based on host, it gives the authentication inside this file. So when you give cat this file, you can say that this parameter you have to understand. These parameters you have to understand. Let me go and discuss. You can say what is the type? Type indicates what type of connections. We already discussed. How many types of connections are there? Any database? Yes.
We have three.
Local connection, remote
Remote.
connections. If it is a local connection, what was the value under type? Under type should be local. If it is a local connection, under type it should be local. If it is a remote connection, under type it should be host. For remote connections, we have to make the entry under type host. For local connection, we have to make entry under type local. So whenever the under type is local is there, that means this is the local connection. If you see host is there, this entry for remote connections, that is the type parameter. Clear? Type parameter. Next, database. Suppose, let me see. Suppose local database all user all like this. So address not required, method trust. Okay. What is the meaning of this? Means this entry for local connections. We are seeing under type local. So this entry for local connections. That means local by locally, local for all local connections. For all users can connect to any database without password. Trust means without password. The locally, why we are able to connect the database without password? You can see PSQL. It's not asking any password. Why? By default configured inside pgsp.config file for all the local connections, the authentication method is configured trust. When you configured authentication method is trust for any connections, that could be local or remote. It's not asking password while establish the connection. That is the reason we are able to establish the connection without password locally. You can say that's why able to connect without password. If you change this authentication method, yes, we can change. So what are the types of authentication methods? Either trust or MD5. If it is MD5, it's asking the password. We have to enter the password while establish the connection. If it is trust means without password, it won't ask password. That is the difference between trust and MD5. In real time, we should use MD5 only. These are the authentication methods. How you want to establish the connection without password or with password, you can configure the right parameter. So database means which database you want to give access for local connections. So if we give all means for all the users can connect any database. What are the database inside the cluster? We are giving permission all. Under user all means for all the users can connect to for all the database without a password if we give trust. Address means we giving local connections. Local connection means no need to mention address. If it is a remote connection, what type of can say should be host. Suppose I given Postgres database. Here I given ABC user. So 192.168.0.111. 0 method is trust. So what is the meaning of this? We are giving this line entry for remote connections. Host is remote connections. So from which application server? It's what are the connections coming from this IP address, this application server. For only this user, ABC user, if user is established the connection from this application server, the username is ABC, can connect to this database without password. That is the meaning of this line. If we keep MD5, that means from this application server, we can establish the connection using this ABC user, can connect to this database with password. Suppose if we give all, what is the meaning of this? From this application server, any user can connect to this database with the password. Suppose if we give all, under database if we give all, what is the meaning of this? From this application server, these are remote connections only. From this IP address application server, whatever the connections coming from, whatever the user, for all users can connect to any database with the password. Clear? Any queries in this? Type is either local or host. Database means which database you want to give access. If you give specific database, give the DB name. If you want to allow all the database, keep all. User means which user you want to give access. If you want to give specific user, give the username. If you want to give all the users, keep all. Address means for which application IP address you want to give permission, give the IP address. Method means type of authentication, how you want to establish the connection, either trust or MD5. Trust means without password. MD5 means it should enter the password.
What is the meaning of Scrum authentication method?
Sorry?
Scrum authentication.
Scrum means it's like it's a trust only. We never used Scrum, so we used if you want to without password trust or MD5. That's it.
Hi, Venkat.
Yeah, go ahead.
Actually, this topic is very interesting. And in which case, in real scenario, we'll go for without password, like a trust.
That is local connections only.
Oh, local collection zone. Okay.
Yeah.
The rest of connections should be used for the
MD5 only.
MD5. And yeah, and one more thing. If you give the specific, we have a VNet and we have configured with a specific IP address to a particular user. So then we can go ahead with a trust, right? So then the outside people are not using the
Why
trust.
we are giving the trust other people, other remote connections?
Yeah, actually, we are regularly connecting with one same IP address.
We never use the remote connections for if you give a specific user, that user only can connect.
Okay.
Under user, you can specify the username, not all.
Okay.
Here, so if you give the username ABC, that
that's also
for
good.
this application, only ABC user can connect to any database with
Trust.
without password if you specify the trust.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. But it will be applicable in real time, or else
We never used remote connections trust.
Okay.
Okay, if you want to, you can use. That is the recommendation for local connections. By default, configured trust. For local people means who are logged into locally DBA people.
Yes.
So DBA people will not every time it's enter
required authentication.
that is a headache.
Yes.
So that's why by default given trust is without password can connect. If you change this, let me change vi pchsba.config file. Let me go to. You can see this is for all the users can connect any database without password. Let me change MD5. Let me. If you do any changes on this file, you have to reload the services. We'll see what is the meaning of reload, what is the meaning of restart. If you restart means the database will be down. If you reload means database
The
never
files.
down.
Mhm.
There is a background process. It go on to reread the configuration file without impacting to connections. We can reload. So if you do any changes on this file, you can reload the services. How to reload means just the same as we using PGCTL, na?
Mhm.
Let me, what is the command? Yeah, just a reload. That's it.
Okay. No.
Without reload, it won't affect the values. Now you can see PSQL. It's asking to enter the
Password.
password. What is the which user password? Default you take the Postgres is the
Post
default
password.
user.
Mhm.
Suppose if you don't know password, then go back to MD5 to trust, then change the password DB level, then back to MD5, then log into with the
Yes.
correct password. Now I don't know password, so let me change back to trust. We'll change the password and we'll see. Local trust. You have to reload. Now PSQL alter user Postgres alter username with the password. This is how you can change. Reset the password. You can see. Now I know password. Now if you want to change, you can change and
MD5 and we can able to connect
yeah,
with
yes.
password.
MD5. Yes, now I can
Reload.
reload.
Mhm.
Now PSQL Postgres. If you give correct password, then only it will allow to establish the connection. If you give wrong
Yes.
password, it throws the error. So
Got it.
this is about pghsba.config file. Okay.
So
Any queries as of now?
so you mean PG underscore, PG underscore HBA file concept is clear for today, or
Sorry?
else is there
Sorry?
for the today session PG underscore HBA configuration file concept is completed, or else will be continued tomorrow?
Completed this one.
Yeah,
If there are
yeah.
any queries, let me know.
Oh,
Nothing
okay,
is
okay.
there. Only 4 parameters we understood.
Yes, 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 yes. Thanks, Venkat.
Yeah. Any queries as of now? Whatever.
Venkat, I have one more query.
Go ahead.
So here in the user, you have mentioned that ABC user, right? So you're given a MD5, so which means it will ask for a password. In case the same ABC user, if I connect PG admin and if I restrict over there, how it will work?
Sorry.
If, here you have mentioned that ABC user,
ABC user, yes.
you have given ABC and you've given MD5. So which
Hmm.
means the database you've given all. So for example, if I have 5 database, it will allow for all 5 database, it will allow the connection, right?
Not allow. If the ABC user having the privileges to connect the database,
Okay.
grant connect on database. If the user having this is we given privileges, we given allow the connection, but the user having the right privileges to connect the database, then only can connect. We can give
Okay.
the access like a grant, like a connect on database name HRMS to username ABC. Like this, after configuring this file, DB level, we have to give the access DB level, schema level, object level.
Okay. Yeah, that was my question. Okay.
Yeah. Will that user management will cover in this. Don't worry. Just
Okay.
how you can give just we are giving allow access. Suppose we given listener underscore address equal to star. That means just we are able to cluster listener able to listen all incoming connections. Just the listener has to listen the connections. After listening, the user able to write privileges can connect based on the pgsp.config file. Even though if you given access at a cluster level, listener underscore address equal to star. First it is listen the connections, then go to the pgsp.config file. This user what database having permission. So for application IP address, actually the user is trying to connection from 11 to IP address, the username ABC. Here we configured ABC user for this IP address only, not 112, not 113. So based on this pgsp.config file and also DB level privileges, it can check whether it is the user having have real privileges at a DB level, object level, schema level, then establish connect the right database, right schema.
Okay, Venkat. So one more thing, like you would have seen many production servers, right? So
Yeah,
what is
yes.
the best configuration you have then for all the production servers?
That is authentication method is MD5.
Okay.
So based on application, how many application servers are there? So we can give the like this based on one server or two servers.
Okay.
Okay.
So this is on the security level. So that you are mentioning only particular IPs has to connect.
Yes,
So that
correct.
security you are maintaining.
Well,
Okay.
if you want to many IP address, you can keep like this 0.0. It consider it will allow for any application server so the user ABC can connect any database. If you keep all for any IP address, any user can connect any database with password like this configuration. The combination like this based on requirement we can keep.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. Okay. So okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
So my question is from the application side, from the application server. So my thought is, as a DBA, we already prepare this server, get the host name, get the database name, the port number, and the other, credential to the application team. I we still the one as a DBA to install the binary for the application server, or it is the server team
Yeah.
that will install?
Okay. So in general, the application team they can use GUI tools, either PC admin tool or DB viewer. They never connect database via command line mode because they don't know commands. So instead of Windows Server, we are considering two missions, Linux missions. One is a client, other one is the database server. How the live environment, how the applications users can connect the database, what are the issues are facing. Whether it is Windows mission or client Linux mission, the client is anything. The client can be anything. That could be if it is Windows, we are using PC admin. If it is Linux mission, we need PSQL. That's it. The way of connection is same. What are the issues are facing? This is every day we are getting the issues like this. They never connect via command line mode. Very rare scenario. If yes, they want to connect via Linux admin, we should install binaries. They should get the binaries. Yes, they ask to DBA install binaries, but that very rare case, they want to establish the connection GUI tools only because they know all are Windows operating system. They don't know Linux admin, Linux operating system. Clear, Popsy?
Yes, I get that.
So
Then
yeah, go ahead.
in what cases, like if you want to raise put it in percentage, where they allow all connection to all the user, like is it like 80 to 90% of the time they allow all connection to connect to all the user, or most of the time they restrict the particular user to connect to the server? Do you get
Yeah,
my question?
yeah, we can give most all of the users. We can filter by giving a IP address. We can most of the game we can keep all users only.
So then by filter by the host server IP address, the application server IP address.
Yes, here you can say here you can mention the IP address. So under IP address you can give your respective application IP address. So here you can give all only. Here you can give the application what database they are going to use. Here I mention the right database name. Under user always you can give all users. Here you can give the application IP address. Here you can give the type of authentication.
Okay, on that place, but most of the time it has to be password authentication or trust. Which one is the most,
Yeah,
request?
trust is for local connections only. For remote
Oh.
connection means that could be host. Host means remote connections. Local means it's a local connection. Who log into locally? As a DBA, we are logging to database server locally. Other people, they can establish the connection remotely. So for remote connections, always we configured MD5, not trust. You can keep MD5. They should enter the password before establish the connection. Clear?
So that means we have to provide the password for the application team then.
Yes, we have to, yeah, database. I reset the password right here. Alter username with password. Like this, we can reset the password. For all the application users, we have to create the users, DB users in the database. We have to, while creating the user, we have to assign the password. That username password we have to share to application team. That's happening every database, correct? That could be SQL
Okay.
DBA, that could be Oracle,
Yeah.
Postgres. That is same.
Okay. So my last question is it like in most cases, in some cases, I'm just asking this question based on my experience in SQL, because sometimes the database machine can host application machine. Does that, usually happen as well in Postgres scenario? Like application and the database machine sitting on the same server. Do you understand my question?
SQL Server, I am not fully aware. Can someone,
So
many SQL DBs are there?
what I'm saying is it possible like application server to install on the same server that we still have the SQL, like that we still have our cluster?
Srinivas, I think you are SQL DB, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so the data masking, okay, in available, okay, always encrypted, and data masking is available in SQL Server, okay, from 2016 and 19. But
Okay.
whether this feature is available in Postgre or not, I'm not sure. So what is the
No,
masking like? Okay,
that's not the question.
the
That's not the
unauthorized
question.
people will not see. For example, the bank account, the last four numbers will be displayed, and
That is data
before
masking,
number,
right? That
yeah,
is
data
No,
masking.
no, no. That's not my question. My question is, let's say this server now, we have cluster on this server. We have 2 or 3 cluster on this server, right?
okay. Yes.
Now, application that want to connect to this cluster, let's say it's a bank application. Is it possible to install the application, the bank application on this same server that our cluster is installed? Like instead of you have 2 server now, you have one server that hosts application,